Okay, so yeah, I was also asked to speak about a specific topic, which is use of technology by Asia Art Archive. And so it's somewhat adapted. I retitled it Digital Technology at the Asia Art Archive because I think probably many of you are familiar with the Asia Art Archive here in Hong Kong. But for those of you who are not, the Asia Art Archive is an organization institution based in Shenzhen, which is one of the primary organizations dedicated to the documentation of contemporary art in Asia. And much of its presence is digital and online. So you can see here, this is the website when you go to it. This is advertising the symposium that will be taking place about art periodicals across Asia in mid-January. And so the website is one of the main kind of interfaces for interacting with the Asia Art Archive's public. And this includes also, not only documentary and documentation presented and produced by the researchers at the Asia Art Archive itself. So you see here, this is materials for the future, which deals with contemporary art in China from the post-85 moment. And so you see some of the oral histories that are available for viewing. This is Huang Yongping, for instance, in an interview. But also what is available is some representation of the collections that are at the Asia Art Archive. This includes the library. So you see here the physical library, as well as a special collection. So this is a view of the physical vault. Now, so these are materials that have to be consulted on site, but the website does make available some of the materials. So you see here a record for one of the notebooks, handmade, that was by the artist, Hong Kong-based artist Ha Bik-chuan, who is the source of one of the largest collections currently being processed by AAA. And so if you go to this page, you'll be able to see a PDF of the entire book from cover to cover. And there's also archival material that's been digitized. So this is from Materials of the Future, and this relates to the Southern Artist Salon. And so from the mid-1980s, 86, 87. And then also other kinds of documentation, including photographs. This is relating to a performance by the artist Ling Yiling, who did a performance called Safely Maneuvered Through Linghe Road. And I'm showing this because I think, especially when it comes to newer forms of media like performance or video, the documentation of it becomes extremely important. And this is one of the one of the primary functions of an institution like AA is to somehow find a way to preserve and document these kinds of practices. And you can see what the performance in this case involved was the artist Ling Yiling crossing the road while moving this kind of very heavy wall of bricks, so one at a time. So it took several hours for him to perform the piece, and with some peril with the trucks and traffic. You can see him moving it. And so AA has photo documentation as well as some video documentation of the piece. But in this year, 2017, for Art Basel, it also worked with an outside artist, Noni de la Pena, to make a VR piece, virtual reality piece, that would kind of give visitors the chance to explore what the piece would have been like from the artist's perspective. So you see the installation in Art Basel here. And this is an image of Noni de la Pena, the maker of the work, from her TED Talk. And then close-up of the VR installation. And here's the screen image of what is being seen. And then here is some screenshots from the actual kind of piece from the viewer's perspective, I guess. And so it was adapted as Passage to Life of a Wall on Linghe Road. And so basically the person wearing the VR headset gets to experience the piece from Ling's perspective of being in the middle of the road and moving these bricks across the road. And it's not exactly documentation because it's in the form of a video game, but it's more to give people kind of a sense of the experience of the piece. You know, what it's like to stand in front of a bus, for instance, while you're trying to move these stacks. And one thing that the video game makers did get right is how easily, I guess, the bricks fall over and kind of how clumsy it can be to try to move these stacks. But because it is and also what it's like to have oncoming traffic kind of blocking your way or you're blocking their way. And because it's a video game, I guess you can also throw bricks at the traffic if you wanted to. I don't think Ling did that. And then finally, I wanted to talk about another example of technology as it is manifested in the research projects at the Asia Art Archive. And this is a project called Bibliography of Modern Contemporary Art Writing in South Asia. It's not very visual exactly, but it is very important because it is a census of over 10,000 written texts from India in over 12 languages, so a fairly large number from all of the 20th century. And what this allows is it gives researchers a chance to kind of really look across the different languages into the history of art writing in India, because that's one of the main ways researchers and scholars will have for thinking about the development of Indian art. And so you see here the kind of the options that come up when you start typing. And then also the kinds of material, the kinds of texts that are published. And these are the kind of the results that come up if you do a search. So you can see there are individual records that can be looked at more closely. And so this is kind of the very standard, I think, when people think about the availability of material online, this is what most people think of, you know, digitized text, PDFs. That is very kind of, you know, at this point, I think everyone is familiar with that mode of delivery of documents and documentation. What's exciting about the bibliography in specific is the way that it not only does that, but it also has this layer of visualization of the data. So really working with this large database as a kind of big data project. So that allows researchers to really think about not just individual texts, but also to be able to work with the text as data, you know, and to analyze the evolution of art writing in South Asia. And this means, for instance, looking at the prominence or lack thereof of specific individuals. So you see here the visualization on the left side are specific writers with artists. So who was very present. And this is in English, whereas this is in Bengali. So you can see there's a big difference. And then also which magazines and periodicals are associated with these writers. And then for place, you can see the kind of evolution over time of where publications were taking place. So in the early kind of post-war years, you can see the prominence of Mumbai. And then the shift eastward, so growing prominence of Guwahati. And then the breakdown of different kinds of materials. And then in terms of clusters, you can see the this visualization kind of gives a clearer sense of kind of what percentage of material was being written in what language. So you can see, you know, the kind of early prominence of English and then the later kind of rise of other languages, including Assamese. And then the rise of Guwahati as a location for a publication for many of these. So this really opens up new avenues, I think, for research, for scholars when they're thinking about art writing, not just kind of doing the standard literary interpretation of specific individual texts, or thinking about the kind of, you know, interpretation, reception of individual artworks, but really thinking about like being able to do these kind of broad sweep overviews of the evolutions in the larger national context. And I think it's important, however, to connect this back to the kind of very lived, I think, So if that's maybe the, I think the term was A signifying interobjective scene, right? So that the big data scene is in some ways that is kind of the A signifying, right? It's in some ways no one intended for that kind of visualization to happen when they were writing those pieces, but after the fact it becomes possible to analyze human activity, right? But then it also connects back to the very intersubjective activity of scholars working with the material and creating kind of these dialogues. And so the use of technology is not just kind of for the sake of putting these things online, but then for the purposes of stimulating these kinds of very kind of lively conversations. So, yeah.
Hello. Is this working? Yep. Hi, hello. So when I was looking at this, the title of the session, the title was given to us, embracing new technology in the art world, first thought really broad. Like I didn't know what to focus on, and then the second thought, the second question that popped into my head is who is embracing new technology in the art world, and then I looked at the program of this symposium. There's this collector session. There's the I think there's the museum director session, and there's the non-institution practices. And so, like for this couple of minutes, I want to give a shout out to artists, and kind of referring particularly to the topic of this session, media artists and how their art-making processes work. And I'll just give a few examples of media artworks in my previous exhibitions, just very generic and just mainly to raise questions, then answering them. And so that like kind of later on in the session, we can discuss further. So this one here, I have 5 artworks to show you. This is the first one, Mask by Tobias Klein, Frederick Hellberg, and Laura Lemes. And it's a 3D printed model based on a Cantonese opera headpiece. The intimacy is not so much on the physical handling of the object itself, but it wouldn't be like the kind of more traditional form of sculpture. But here in this piece, the intimacy or more the romantic imagination of the art-making process is more on, like, imagine this artist sitting in front of a computer, drawing, maybe coding, adding a filter, adding some special visual effects, and then see what it looks like. If it doesn't look like it, like maybe reverse, go back to it, and then add other digital elements to it. So it's not so much that kind of traditional form of intimacy of art making you would normally imagine. And also for the physical making process, the 3D printing process, is actually, it's not the most fun to observe. Maybe the first 5 minutes kind of fascinating, and then it gets pretty boring, and it could take a really long time. But essentially the precision from 3D printing for this particular artwork is the very element that gives this artwork the context and the materiality of the context of this artwork. And here, which button is this? Oh, the other side. Well, it's not in the right order, but anyway. Here, this other artwork is basically the opposite of precision. BNC by Martin Reich. It's a sculpture made of BNC connectors, a type of very common radio frequency connector. And the idea is to feed the signals from 2 video players into this complex structure and eventually back to the individual monitors. But within the structure, the signals are interfering each other. And that's why the videos are distorted and unpredictable. And here you see the artist plays with the nature of the technology, and in this case, signal and noise. And to make this this is the nature of the technology itself actually make the context of the artwork. And this one, right, this other artwork, this is actually a new piece by Foamball early this year in my exhibition, One World Exposition 2.1. And here you have, it's actually his first VR work, kind of based on his seminal piece, Q3D. Based on the retro game Quake, this is a game art with computer-generated characters shooting roses at each other. And this is kind of a step into the VR realm by the artists. Now the VR is more accessible, and compared to decades ago when you would need considerable manpower and heavy-duty machine to make VR happen, here accessibility of the technology actually means to the artists the quality and the opportunity to execute an artistic vision. Right, and this one is another type of media art practices. And actually, disclaimer: I didn't create this show. I showed Peter Nelson's piece in an exhibition last year. But this is a really good example of a type of media art making process. It's called Autosave Read Out by Andrew Look, Peter Nelson, and Alexis Myers. And this is an artwork based on the game engine of first-person shooting game Counter-Strike, and it's using the game engine. Actually, the artist did a digital reconstruction of a redoubt in Kowloon, Hong Kong. And basically, the experience is that you are playing this kind of online shooting games, going through the tunnels of a redoubt in Hong Kong, and kind of admiring the visual in the tunnel systems. You would see kind of carving of street names of London, so that the kind of British soldiers in the 1940s, they would recognize the kind of the way around in the tunnels. And kind of through the tunnels, you also see kind of sound elements of kind of nostalgic 1940s, 1950s Japanese jazz or kind of British radio, kind of old school British radio. And kind of the experience is kind of you're going through admiring this cultural heritage sites in Hong Kong and looking through the walls and the tunnels, and then all of a sudden you see an enemy in front of you, and by the time you realize you're actually in a war game, like you're already shot in the head and die. And this is the sort of experience, this is the sort of kind of unique experience that when the artist chose the online war game as a medium for their heritage material. And this interactive interface actually makes up a big part of the context of the artwork. And then finally, right here, this is an artwork I showed in an exhibition last year at the International Symposium on Electronic Arts in Hong Kong. And right, this is a work of real-time data visualization. In the middle, you see two cameras looking at each other's lenses and the visual data analysis by the computers. And on the sides, the computers visualize the data analysis as nerve fiber. And that's like obviously an artistic decision on the artist with symbolic meaning, but essentially this artwork is a really good example of kind of a process, an art-making process where the artist kind of creates a condition with computers and just let it play out in real time. And these are just a few examples, a few types of media art-making processes, among many, 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 and many more to come, as I think Zhang mentioned earlier, kind of this new technology, the idea of kind of new, like it's a ever-developing process, So kind of as the technology ever developing and also artists developing their own technique in media to develop other artworks. These are all important factors for kind of for us non-artists in our decision making. Whether it's like reading an artwork or writing about an artwork or the decision on collecting an artwork, curating a collection or curating an exhibition, these are all kind of important factors, and it contributes to it should contribute to our decision making. So these are the questions I wanted to raise, and let's talk in a bit. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria Chang from HTC Vive. I want to thank Meg and also Hong Kong Art Gallery Association for your very kind invitation. It's a real honor to be here and to be talking with old friends, Professor Zhang. So today, before I start, I want to talk about a little bit about what we do as a tech company and how we see recently the latest technology has been really rooted within the art world. So HTC Vive. Vive is a virtual reality platform that provides hardware, software, and also a content distribution platform. So what we are trying to do from a corporate perspective is to make positive impact transformations through latest technology in different areas in life, from medicine to real estate to education to arts and culture and so on. So, of course, arts is a very important aspect. And early this month, actually, we launched a program called Vive Arts. It's a global VR program that we have the intention to further advance creation and also appreciation of the arts. So what we do here is basically to facilitate the use of virtual reality, of augmented reality, and also for artificial intelligence to help institutions and also artists to achieve their mission as well as their artistic vision. And we have been really lucky because in preparation for the Vive Arts program, in the past 2 years, we've been working with a lot of amazing partners around the world who has been producing a lot of great works that really, I think, created a really huge momentum that we can see specifically this year. So today I want to share with you some of the upcoming and recent projects that we and our partner have. So just in 3 days' time, Tate Modern is going to open a major retrospective of the Italian artist Amedeo Modigliani. And this exhibition is going to be the largest retrospective of the artist ever held in the UK. And what's really exciting is that the exhibition curator, Nancy Irison, chose to use VR as part of the storytelling mechanism within the exhibition. So then a visitor next week, when they go to Tate Modern in the gallery, you can not only see the sculpture and the signature paintings of the artist, but also you will be invited to put on the headset and then get immersed into the working and living world of the artist back in early 20th century in Paris. And another example of museums using VR is at the Royal Academy of Arts in London. In December, is going to open a major exhibition called From Life. The exhibition is to mark the RA's 250-year anniversary as a museum and also as an art school. So the exhibition celebrates its core teaching mechanism of the art school, which is live drawing. So when you go to the exhibition, you will see live drawing artworks way back from 250 years ago, all the way to nowadays, how artists use the latest technology to create. So you will see works by architects Farshi Musafi, Humphrey Ocean, Inka Shonibare, and also Jonathan Eel. And aside from museums, a lot of private collections are also exploring using VR to achieve their own mission. For example, the DSL collection of Chinese contemporary art, as well as the Kremer collection. It's an Amsterdam-based collection that has more than 70 old master paintings of Dutch and Flemish painters. So what the owner of the Kremer collection has decided to do is that in order to engage more audience around the world, he commissioned an architect to create a virtual museum architecture within the VR world, and then later place these beautiful collection onto the wall in the museum. So as a viewer of this experience, when you put on a headset, you walk within this very spectacular architecture, and you can go very close to see the works on the wall and to read a label and to listen to the audio guide. The experience was designed exactly as how you would experience a museum experience, and that's the wish of the owner. And aside from museums, theaters are also really manipulating this specific nature of virtual reality, how it is very engaging and it creates a complete different kind of sensation and audience engagement. So a good example is the National Theatre in London. They produced this piece called Draw Me Close, where there is only one audience at one time. So as the audience, you put on the headset, and then you wear 2 Vive trackers on your hand. And then you will be entering this virtual room that is your childhood home's living room. And then you will see your mother coming back home, who is the actress here, wearing 3 trackers on her. So then you can both interact with your mother in this virtual living room of your childhood home, but also interact with her in the physical world as well. It's a very, very, very powerful piece. And this piece was shown recently at the Tribeca Film Festival and also at Venice Film Festival. And another even more exciting aspect is how, as you said, artists are really manipulating this new medium of art to create amazing artworks. For example, Marina Abramovic really see how, maybe you have heard people describe VR as the empathy machine, because when you're immersed within an environment, what you feel is so much stronger than simply viewing a painting or watching a documentary. It's something really compelling, and it can generate really strong feelings, reactions. So what she did is that she used VR to create a piece to address a topic that she's personally very passionate about on environment and sustainability issue. And then Jeff Koons also did a really fascinating piece. So what he did is that he worked with actress who is placed with multiple motion capture device, so that her movement is shot and then transcribed into virtual reality. So in this VR experience, when you put on a headset, you immerse into an outdoor garden, very beautiful day, and then you see in the middle of this park, there is the signature sculpture of Jeff Koons' ballerina. And you may be walking around and you go close to the ballerina to see the detail of the sculpture, and all of a sudden the ballerina comes to life and have an interaction with you. So another example is Oliver Elias's Rainbow. I won't elaborate on this piece because we have brought this experience over to the art symposium. I strongly encourage you to go over and take a look at this really nice piece of Oliver's during the break afterwards. This piece is actually being shown right now at the Venice Biennale within this main exhibition as part of the Biennale. So I really hope you get some time to look at it. If you're also interested in learning more about how VR is used in the art world, please visit our website at arts.vive.com. Thank you.
So that's quite interesting. And I haven't seen these examples before that all of these people are using. I mean, I heard about Jeff Koons is using that. I don't know, Abramovic is using that too. But let me ask you a question, so probably we can start with that discussion. I mean, if I were an artist and I wanted to use your technology and I wanted to somehow deconstruct your technology, like take it apart and do according to what I needed to do, or so totally change the nature of your proprietary technology, what would you say?
Well, as the official representative of a company, we will ask you kindly to follow the product guidelines so that you have the best experience. But I guess in reality is that we would love to be challenged to see what new ideas can come up, to new concept and proposal can come up. Because during a collaborative process like that, sometimes we get a lot of very constructive feedback that some of my developer engineering team may find useful when they further construct the next generation of the technology. So I wouldn't say it's completely not encouraged.
The reason I ask this is that there are so far technology to most sort of a common understanding is that technology is a means to an end. It's a utility. It's a vehicle to achieve other goals, other means, as a means to an end. So, as I sort of mentioned in my very short presentation, that technology actually takes on a different kind of a role, or technology has always been giving that role, except it has always been overlooked. In fact, the humanity is inseparable from technicity, so to speak. So technology and humanity is sort of a co-evolutionary pair. But I think that aspect has not been so exposed in the history of technology, and the history of humanity, because that technology, to a broader sense, like fire is technology, language is technology. So it's part of your daily experiences. But with the so-called new technology, the mechanical technology and digital technology, so technology becomes somehow alienated, sort of becomes another part of outside of corporal body. It's an extension. It's an other, right? But so the culture has always this very ambiguous and hate and love relationship with technology. But in the moment that technology is ubiquitous, and we basically are already robots, already cyborgs, because we cannot live with our phones or with anything that is sort of a it's become already a part of a nature extension, part of our organic life. So what is really interesting is that because of that, the art making, when we come back to our construction of our subjectivity, to our sort of a construction of a social and a cultural space. How do we really see that not only as a means to an end, as we commonly understood, but rather sort of open up another dimension and to engage technology as we would engage any other objects, organic or inorganic, technological or ephemeral, as part of the construction of a new identities in this new world. And I think that is what really put in front of us as a challenge and as also a interesting sort of prospect.
Can I add, like to your question to Victoria, it's kind of bound to happen when, like when you said like it's like technology, it's like a means to an end, but then within the culture of hactivism, in the community of media artists or in the community of media arts, like hacking is kind of like kind of bound to happen. Like not only that, but I mean, and within the hacking culture, especially when it's kind of against corporate culture as well. But other than that, for most of the media artists I've worked with, or probably like I've talked to in general, their practice is rarely kind of confined by ready-made technology. And most of the time, like instead of kind of applying ready-made technology to their artworks, most of the time they actually kind of would need to learn new techniques or kind of invent new technology, invent new techniques to kind of to apply those into their new artwork. So referring back to your question of kind of like what your response would be, the kind of the corporate response would be to kind of deconstruct this ready-made device of the Vive. I'm pretty sure it's already happening. It's kind of like that I was very curious of the corporate attitude as well.
Another thing I thought about when you were saying what you just said is that we may see technology as it is now from our perspective, but the next generation sends a very, very different place as where we are today. Why I'm saying that is that we see such a big difference on the reaction of the user when they experience one same experience. For example, the DSL collection VR, adult enter, very calm, very poised. They probably are aware that people are watching. But then kids, when they enter, they don't want to come out. They will spend a really long time, say 10 minutes in one experience and really get awed by the experience. And once they come out, they can actually give you a good overview about what they've just learned in that VR experience. And also another example is that, for example, the AAA Lingy Ling work. I've seen how adults entering into the experience and they're worried about how to use the controller, where to put, how to turn. Whereas kids, when they go in, they just pick it up immediately. So it's just a very different experience. And when the next generation become our age, I don't think technology is going to be something, it's part of their body, part of their gene.
I think I would say that one thing that I didn't touch on is, I was talking about the use of technology to kind of preserve previous cultural practices and previous cultural products and works. But one thing that, is also going to be an issue is thinking about, we're talking about technology as something that is of the future, but it's also going to be something of the past in that future. When we're looking at VR 30 years from now, is not going to be, high tech. It's going to be kind of obsolete tech, right? And how do museums and cultural preservation organizations think about the preservation of those technologies? I mean, one example that to think about is, in architecture, most of the planning is no longer done on paper. It's done through CAD and kind of, software. But a lot of that software is proprietary and then goes out of date. And then how do you retrieve that? And it kind of disappears. And so it could be the case that man is a prosthetic god in some ways, but the god has a limited shelf life, So.
Shelf life, yeah. Well, technology becomes obsolete very quickly. And so I think one of the issues is that how do we see? I mean, is technology actually technology? Heidegger said technology, the essence of technology is not technology, and I would say that probably as an extension and with the contemporary experiences that technology is, the essence of technology is precisely technology, because technology has a linear sort of a genealogy. It has its own sort of a family tree. And technology is an invention. And when technology is invented, it takes on its own line of sort of life, and it takes on its own futurity. So when technology is obsolete, I mean, that obsolescence actually is a beginning of a new sort of a cycle of life. And so in that sense, I think the notion of a new and old, if we look at time-space, not from a linear sort of a conception of a time-space, which I think modern science already told us very clearly. So if we follow the sort of a consecutive time sort of a conception, then we probably will be lost. Now, we already are at the multiple times simultaneously crashing upon us, right? The simultaneity and instantaneity, that is everything that we experience these days. So I think when we think about technology here, we really are thinking about another dimension that very different from the concept of technology, from the past.
I think that's probably one of the most, I see, kind of distinctive features of media art as kind of, or some people would say new media art, that that by definition, media art has this medium of new technology. And you mentioned earlier in your presentation kind of how, like within media art itself, has the ability to reach people in a way that kind of other art forms can't. And this is kind of like why I said earlier with kind of most distinctive features of media art is that unlike other traditional media art forms, like when technology like our smartphones are already so much part of our lives, it's very intuitive for artists or curators who want to reach audience who are familiar with this type of medium. And why wouldn't you make use of this kind of medium to reach your audience or to reach the people who would read your artwork? And I guess to push further to like this point of kind of art making with new technology, I suppose there's another layer to this, is that in terms of curating and also archiving this type of media artworks, like you said, new technology is kind of, by definition, new technology is kind of, to a certain period of time, it would already kind of be obsolete. And that creates like a realm of problems in terms of like archiving media artworks. And I think there's probably 5 or 10 years ago, like there was this still quite a prominent concern that how do you put a media artwork into an archive? For kind of, as an example, maybe 1970s, 1980s concrete poetry kind of machines. When you put it into an archive, those type of technology that actually make the concrete poetry work, like whatever motors or the machines, they may not be available nowadays anymore. And if you want to take an artwork outside of the archive and put it in an exhibition, how do you define it as the original form of the machine? Do you kind of by definition, do you want to change the artwork, the interior kind of elements of the artwork and make it move again to reach that original state that this machine is supposed to be moving? Or do you let it kind of stay at its state and then keep it as a historical piece?
I think this is quite a practical question, and that problem probably is very, very relevant to the gallery week here to some extent. In fact, as far as I know, that for example, Nanjong Pak's video installation, he used a particular type of video display, TV display, which of course is obsolete. We don't have this anymore. And so ZKM, for example, as a major media art institution, when they had foresight, and they bought multiple sets for those for future preservation purposes. But then even those sets were already cannot keep up with the archiving sort of demand. So in the end, even if these models still are available, but soon there will be no parts to sort of support this hardware anymore. In no time, then these works will be obsolete, in the sense that it's a physical form. It's a very particular aesthetic flavor would be lost, because you can't actually reproduce an old TV set like the ones made in the 50s or 60s or what, you know. So I think that's also, we are talking about all of this. How do we actually preserve digital art pieces? One of the interesting model is to, like how music is conserved, right? Conservated. Music scores is music. We don't have the pianos sort of at the Bach's Baroque time was playing anymore, long gone. But music sort of handed down and being played with contemporary instruments, or different. Even if it resembles piano, but it's not a piano from the 1700s. So in a way, what makes music still viable is the piano piece, the concert, the sonata is viable, is that the scores. So one of the means to preserve a media art piece is to precisely write down the description, the function of the work, and in the future generation, that sort of descriptive narrative can be preserved as a guideline and a manual for recreate the work with the current technology, whatever technology that would come at that particular time and space. So this is also one of the ways to actually buy, collect, and preserve media art to some extent. But we are exploring many different ways. In fact, this new collection that we are going to launch very soon, it's already in process. The home media art collection at ZKM, that I'm part of the curatorial team. I'm curating with Peter Weibel together. This is quite a major undertaking, trying to sort of collect a large body of work that would that are not that collectible by the museum standard, and try to create this new standard and create the new sort of canon for media art collection. And so it's ambitious, and so we are still looking at many different challenges and tackle the problems that's coming up. We have a few more minutes probably, and we can open to the floor if anybody wants to ask a question.
Yes, thank you for this very interesting intervention. I would like to ask one question is about the technology, because when I'm listening to the new media artists, they're always focusing about the technology itself by deconstructing it or using it. But don't you think that the key of the technology is not the technology itself, but the use of the technology, how we use it and its ecosystem? And if we're looking new media history, it's quite long. It's from 1960s. It's over 50 years old now. And we're still talking about new. And it's like technology doesn't have any memory about itself. It's always pushing to the new stuff, but they're repeating the stuff. For example, the VR was, I'm thinking about Jaron Lanier. It was at the beginning of the 90s. It's over 25 years ago. So how we can, when we're looking back, when we're looking the great work, where like Peter Campus, Bill Viola, Dan Graham, Nam June Paik. In fact, it was not the technology itself, but it was always dealing, even Eva S., because she was considering chemistry as a new technology, is always the form and the concept. So in certain ways, it's the way it is used, how it's stimulating the artist and how he can project and interact with it to generate a new paradigm or a new form, a new concept. That's why I'm asking the question. And I'm linking it about also what said Steve Jobs, because he was conceiving new product and new technology, and he was saying exactly that. He says the key is not the technology, the object, but the use is always the using. So what do you think about that?
I think using technology to me is not the right word, because as I mentioned, I do not think technology is an instrument, and I think it's a co-creator with the artist, because technology itself has its own life, has its own sort of autopoiesis, and that I think when we create a work of art, right? This is a sort of a collaborating with the technology, and technology has, as I said, that we are looking at in this particularly in this time in time and space, that technology helps to elevate another sort of a dimension of a subjectivity, because we do not limit that notion of subject only to a human subject, and technology helps to elevate, to help to enliven that notion of because what's life? Life is movement. Life is interaction. Life is the fundamental definition of life is movement. So to that extent, in a very sort of a naive realism's point of view, technology seems to help enliven a once static object, once sort of a reified sort of an image, and I think to that extent we will see that kind of a emergence of new types of life forms as an indispensable kind of a cohabitat of human consciousness. So in that sense, I do not think that technology is not only has instrumental utility, but also has its own subjective and creative potential in its own right.
Yeah, I want to push the point a bit further that like very often, like I hear media artists who would say actually they actually get inspired by the technology they're working with, and it's very much like what Chang said. Like it's kind of not the relationship like when you're using the technology, but it's kind of interrelated. Like sometimes, like I said earlier, like they will have to change the technology to adopt new techniques into their artworks, or kind of vice versa. They may change the ideas because of the technology and change the context of the artwork. But I really agree with you when you said there's no this new the idea in technology, but I think there's this new idea in the audience that when they're experiencing media artworks. And I want to use kind of the artwork I talked about to do with Counter-Strike as an example. For kind of the audience who are maybe audience of that artwork maybe in their 20s or in their early 30s, that's a time that when we were playing Counter-Strike as a kid, and we were really familiar with the interface of Counter-Strike, this game. Maybe for people who aren't that familiar with this interface, they will have a completely different experience. But really, for a particular type of medium or particular type of new technology as the medium, I think different kind of kinds of audience will react to the particular artwork very differently.
I mean, maybe Victoria will have her own kind of answer to this, but it seems like the whole point of Vive Arts is precisely because artists will bring something to the technology, and it's not merely about making use of that. But I mean, I think speaking not from the viewpoint of the artist, but from the viewpoint of a scholar or a researcher, I think there's something, what I was hoping was clear in the bibliography example is that there are ways in which use of computational techniques can make available new avenues and modes of inquiry that aren't possible without, automation and computation, right? And so the idea of those visualizations is precisely, it gets us out of this kind of very traditional scholarship, which is about kind of, very kind of micro level analysis of artwork and of text, and into something which is much kind of more kind of a larger perspective, right? And that's the kind of thing that I think is something that is made available through technology that isn't available otherwise. And so I think that's an example.
But I think in that process, so I think technology also helps to give another dimension, give another life form to a sort of a community building. Right, because you're actually building a community. So there's a kind of a spirit and kind of a emotive dimension adding to us that pure mechanical process. Yeah. Because you're actually creating content and a cultural sensitivities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Having worked with some artists that use technology in their practice, they've shared with me that there's a certain reluctance by many of them to incur in virtual reality, because for them it isolates the experience and removes a sense of the social nature of appreciating and experiencing art, where we're sitting next to someone when you look at a piece, you comment on it, you have that shared experience. And so they still feel uncomfortable creating this environment that isolates the viewer completely. What are your thoughts on this?
We actually hear that a lot, but we also hear very different perspective on the same issue. Also, as technology progresses, viewing experience in VR has become more and more social, meaning that if a piece is designed that way, you don't necessarily have to view it yourself. You can be wearing your goggle, and your friend can be wearing the goggle as well, and you actually are in the same room viewing the same piece of work if you choose to, and you can interact with each other. And of course, we're still pretty early on the technology front in this area, but it's growing really fast. So very soon, the possibility of engaging into a social situation when you are in VR is going to be a built-in very, very soon. And also, I heard a very interesting feedback from a museum director commenting on the same issue, is that he doesn't think it's a problem being by yourself, but he feels very challenged as a professional, a conservative, not conservative, but a very old-fashioned museum professional. He feels that when you enter into the VR, you seem to be under a really strong controlled, what you hear, what you see, where you go. Although, of course, you have a certain level of autonomy, but it's still a very much controlled experience as opposed to when you go to a gallery space. Although I must say that there's also a controlling element that the museum curator has designed for you to go over the narrative that the museum wants to tell you. So different aspects.
What about Project Sansa? The VR version of Second Life?
I heard a lot of discussion about that, but I don't really know the details about it. Can you tell us more?
I was hoping you would know, but but Project Sansa is supposed to be like Second Life, that it's a open world. It's not kind of academically defined as a game because there's no purpose, but it's a social environment in VR that you can interact with people. And there's a lot of studies in academia, particularly for those who have studied in Second Life, that they were expecting a massive VR community, VR social community. In a similar case where in Second Life they will have like a religious community of like hundreds and thousands of like Buddhist members in a religious community, and actually practicing with like meditation lessons like every week, and they would like go to this virtual church. And I think people are expecting that level of social interaction in VR with with this new-ish technology. But I wanted to add with that kind of social interaction element in say in a museum setting, that if most of the museums now like kind of take a lot of other immersive visualization technology as alternative to VR headsets, like bigger maybe projection environments in a full dome, or like a panoramic projection environments, like that kind of hardware installations could potentially facilitate both immersive visualization environments and social interaction.
Are we running out of time? Yeah. One more question, and then we need to.
Since we are talking about technology and the interdependence with the art practice, I want to ask about the technology in the current world, which is AI. So what do you think about the nature of AI, which could probably change the practice of artists, and also like archiving, or maybe the interaction with audience? Especially, there is an argument that AI could replace the role of artists. What do you think about that?
If I would answer first, I think AI would never replace human beings. I think it would add to the pool of, as I always say, subjects. So there's another subject emerging from the sole human subject. So I think it's going to happen, and it's happening, and then it's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think that is a reality that we have to face. And then on the other hand, that also helps to defeat the anthropocentrism that actually is the root problem of the current ecological disasters, and they also help to overcome that the hierarchical sort of structure and this polemic dichotomy between the order system that modernity has created. Okay, thank you to the panelists, and thank you for listening to us.